Right, let's now move on to a two-way if. Right, two-way if. With the one-way if, it was just an if statement on its own. With a two-way if, it's now got, we now have an if and we have an else. Okay, it's one statement, an if and an else. Remember, the condition is still there. That does not change. That's my condition, isn't it? And I'm just checking if num2 is greater than num1. Right? So how does the two-way if statement work? Again, everything is dependent on the condition. When the condition is true, it means that whatever is inside of the if statement executes. This is when the condition is true. That means the if statement executes. When the condition is false, then we execute the else. Whatever is in the else executes. So that is a two-way if. I've got two branches. When the condition is true, do what's inside of the if. When the condition is false, do what is inside of the else. And you should take note of the colon for the after the if condition, and the else has its own colon as well. That is important to take note of. All right. So it's a two-way. True, false. When true, do one thing. When false, do something else. Right? That is your two-way statement. Let's look at a couple of other examples. Right? Also a two-way. This is also a two-way statement. And with this two-way statement, we now have, if you look at this carefully, we've got a statement there and we've got a statement here. So we've got two statements. We've got two statements that are inside of the if. So when that condition is true, when that condition is true, I am going to execute that and I am going to execute that. And then when that condition is false, then I am going to go to the else. There's only one statement in the else, and I am going to execute the statement inside of the else. All right? So let's test the code and let's see what it's doing. Num1 is 10, right? I'm here. Num1 is 10. Num2 is 20. Is num2 greater than num1? True or false? Is num2 is 20. Is 20 greater than 10? True. And because it's true, I'm going to print this statement, and it's going to say num2 is greater than num1, and then I'm also going to print thank you. There are two statements inside the if. I don't go to the else, and I don't execute the statement inside the else, so that does not execute. And then I need to come out of the else, and if there was another statement here, let's say there was another statement here, then I would have executed that statement. But as it stands, there's nothing after the else, so that just ends at that point. So let's move to the next slide and let's see what this one is now doing. Again, it's a two-way if. It's a two-way if. Look at the indentation. The indentation is critical. Right? So look at the indentation. That will give you an idea of which statements are inside of the if and the else. So here I've got these statements. num1 is 10, num2 is 20. I'm going to print hello. So if I look at my output, it's going to print hello. Test the condition is 20 greater than 10. The condition is true. When it is true, it's going to only execute that part, and it's going to display number 2 is greater than number 1. Right? It does not go into the else because the condition is true. And then it will execute the by. So that is what will be executed in that way. Okay, so this is now how we have a two-way. This is how we have a two-way if statement. That's how it's going to work. Right? Let's look at another example. Here, right, I'm introducing you to a new statement in this example. Look at this. Okay, there is something called ELIF. Right? Now, ELIF means else if. So it's having an if statement in the else. That's what that means. Okay? Now, why would we want to do that? Why would we want to do this? So here, when I used the if statement, I used it exactly as I did in the previous example. But in the previous example, if I quickly go back, I used the else. So the else stands on its own. But what if I want the else to have a condition? So that's what the else if does. You'll notice ELIF, and I now have a condition. So if you want to use another condition inside of the else, you cannot say else. This will be wrong to say else and then to put your condition. num2 equals num1. You can't do that. That will give you an error. If you are putting a condition inside of the else, you make use of ELIF. That's what you will need to use. So let's look at this and let's see what gets output in this case and what is the implication of using something like this. So num1 is 10, num2 is 10. So both num1 and num2 have the same value. Then we're checking, is num1 greater than num2? Condition is false. Condition is false. So it means I go to the else if. Is num2 equal to num1? Both are 10. Is num2 equal to num1? And that is true. And because that is true, it's going to print this statement here, and it's going to say number 1 and number 2 are equal. So that's your else if. Right? Let's look at this example here now. It's very much similar to the previous one. It's similar to the previous one where num1 was 10 and num2 is 10. I just changed the value of num1 and num2. Same conditions. Your if statement remains the same. Okay? So now, if num1 is 10 and num2 is 5, let's test this condition. Is num2 greater than num1? Is 5 greater than 10? Condition is false. Let's go to the else. Is 5 equal to 10? Well, that's false as well. both conditions are false, which means both the statements will not execute. And if there was another statement over here, that statement will then execute. But as it stands, there is no other statement, which means that it will just not execute anything inside of this if. Okay? So be aware that if you're using else if, you can have a situation like that. Let's look at the next example. I'm almost at the end. In this case, remember, with the else if, right, you are checking again. But with the else, if you have a straight else, there's no check. When this condition is false, when that condition is false, the else will automatically execute. Unlike in the previous else if, when the condition was false, you went to the else, but you had to still test the condition. You had to test the condition to see if that condition was true. But when you have an else, the minute this condition is false, the minute that condition is false, you automatically go into the else and execute that statement. So when you use an if-else, one of them is going to execute, depending on whether the condition is true or false.